Hey friends, welcome back. I am Jason, and survival often comes down to three main categories: mindset, skills, and equipment. If you've got the right mindset, you can push through. You can make it through a difficult ordeal. If you've got the right skills, you could perhaps tie the right knots, you can make the right traps, you can collect the water and make it safe to drink. If you've got the right equipment, perhaps you won't be in this problem in the first place. Now, there was a really intense survival ordeal that happened in 1982, and his name was Steven Callahan. The man had the right mindset. He had the right skills. He was very well equipped for the environment that he was in. He knew what he was doing, he had the right gear, and he was mentally prepared to be in this really remote stretch of ocean that he was in. He was crossing the Atlantic Ocean. Now, before we get into Steven Callahan's survival ordeal and the just horrible situation that he got himself into and how he overcame it, I'd like for you to take a quick second to hit that thumbs up. Be really grateful for that. If you haven't subscribed, please consider doing so. You won't regret it. We have lots of content coming out all the time. I try to post just about every single day except for Sundays. And if you hit the notifications bell, you won't miss anything. So it's 1982, and Steven Callahan and his buddy are sailing across the Atlantic. The Atlantic Ocean is a huge, vast expanse of nothingness. I mean, holy cow. And he was doing this in a handmade boat, a 21-foot sailboat that he built himself. Very experienced sailor, knew exactly what he was doing, what he was getting himself into. And he and his buddy literally sailed across the Atlantic. And they made it. It took them 2 weeks, but they made it. They made it all the way across the Atlantic and made it to Europe. Pretty incredible undertaking, just that alone. Building your own boat, equipping it, having necessary skills and supplies to be able to get yourself across the Atlantic is pretty incredible. But they made it, they did it. But now on the return journey, Steven Callahan was deciding to do it solo. His buddy was staying in Europe, and Steven was going to head off, and he was going to sail to the Caribbean by himself in his 21-foot sailboat that he built. Seeing as how this sailboat was named the Napoleon Solo, it was only fitting that he was to do this trip by himself. So he sets off from Europe by himself. He's well equipped. He's got all the things and supplies and everything that he could possibly need, or at least think of that he might need on this trip. Weather is fair, the winds are in the right direction, life is good, and he's just getting dialed in. He's about 1,000 miles into his journey, give or take, and he's in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean at this time. He sees off in the distance a storm brewing, dark skies in the direction that he's going. Storm's coming his way, and it's unavoidable. There's nothing he can do about it. He's just got to batten down the hatches and just prepare for this storm. So that's what he does. He's no stranger to storms on the ocean. It's not something he's afraid of necessarily, but so he gets ready for this storm, and as darkness falls, the storm keeps pounding, big, huge waves splashing over the deck. And eventually, he's keeping an eye on everything, making sure everything's still holding water and everything's still afloat and things are secured and tied down where they need to be. He's doing his due diligence. Somewhere in the middle of the night, he finally is like, oh man, I am beat. He's been up for a long time now, going on a 24-hour day. He's exhausted. He needs to try to get a little rack time, close his eyes for a minute, and get a little bit of rest. So that's what he does. Secures everything as best as he can. He lays down, and he's finally, getting jostled around. I don't know how guys sleep like that in small little boats in a rocking ocean, but he did it. He was falling asleep, and then in the middle of the night, boom! Something slams into the hull of his boat, and immediately water is pouring into this tiny 21-foot vessel. So at this point, he thought, I am doomed. I'm 1,000 miles from where I started. I'm 2,000 miles or more from where I need to be. I am doomed. This is bad. I am by myself. It is dark. The sea is angry right now, and I am sinking. But survival mindset kicked in. He smacked himself, literally, I think he said he smacked himself back into order and got to work. And he started prioritizing the supplies and equipment and what he needed to gather and what he needed to do right now to survive the immediate situation that he was in. So he's quickly grabbing survival supplies. He's got a survival bag that he's already pre-planned. He's already packaged up. He's not having to go get individual items per se. He's already got this stuff staged and ready to go if a disaster like this should happen. And that's awesome. That is amazing. And that's what we're always trying to preach on this channel, is that you're prepared and you think ahead as best you possibly can. That's exactly what Steven did. So he grabbed his survival gear. He took his life raft, he pitched it overboard, inflated that life raft, and as his ship is like nosing down into the water, it's kind of pitching forward into the ocean, he's got his life raft off to the side, and he's just gathering as many of the supplies that he could possibly think of, the food, the water, all the things that you can think of. He's trying to get in a hurry. So he's loading up his supplies. He ties his life raft that's now inflated off to his sinking boat. The boat has a couple of capsules in it that are sealed off, and they make this boat fairly unsinkable to some degree. It's not seaworthy anymore. He's not going to sail it anywhere, but the boat is not going under the water at this time because of these sealed air compartments. And that's a good news for him, because that's where all his supplies are. That's his lifeline. That's where his water is, his food, everything. What used to be his shelter is in this ship, in this 21-foot boat that is starting to capsize. And he doesn't want to let this thing go, understandably so. So he's tied off to his boat. The life raft and the boat are slamming into one another. There's crashing into one another because of these rough seas. And he knows that it's inevitable that he's going to have to cut loose, because it's inevitable that some part of the boat or some piece of debris or something like that is going to puncture his life raft, and then he's going to be in a really, really bad spot. So he makes the decision, he makes the call, he unties the life raft from his 21-foot sinking vessel. So as much as he doesn't want to, he makes that call and he separates himself from the Napoleon Solo. So now he's in this small little vessel, this small raft. It's basically a floating tent, and he's in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Thousands of miles of nothing surrounding him, and it's pitch black. The ocean is still pissed. Still big waves splashing. He's getting soaked at every second. Every wave that's coming in is just soaking him, dousing him. He knows that he's in a lot of trouble, but he just waits it out until the sun finally comes up and the sea finally calms and the storm passes. And he looks around. He stands up in this inflatable raft. He stands up, he looks around, and there's nothing. Just blue sky and water as far as he can possibly see. So at this point, Steven's feeling really sorry for himself. But he secures all of his gear, all of his emergency supplies. He ties it off to this life raft. He makes the best of his situation and tries to organize his gear as best as he can. He did a little bit of an inventory. He knew that he had 8 pints of water in sealed cans. He had some peanuts, he had some dried beans, he had some raisins, but very, very meager rations, not a whole lot, considering how far he was from any sort of land. So a few days into being cast adrift on his lifeboat, he knows that he's going to die, that this is the end. He's not going to make it out of this ordeal. But somewhere around day 7 or day 8, something happens. A switch gets flipped in his mind, and he changes his mindset. And he starts to think to himself, maybe he's lying to himself, but he starts to think to himself that the trip's not over. His sailing trip across the Atlantic, back across the Atlantic, isn't over. It's just changed. He's just in a crappier boat now. With this new revelation that he has come across, with this new mindset, he starts keeping a log. He had some notepads, he had some pencils. He started keeping a ship's log like he always did. He just continued that on in his new boat, his new boat without sails. He started exercising every day. He kept his body fit as possible. He did chores. He fished each day as best as he could. He took care of odds and ends. He maintained his life raft. He kept it clean, kept his gear organized. He had a little bit of fishing line, he had some hooks, but what really paid off was a spear gun. It was kind of a crappy spear gun, but that is what enabled him to be able to catch some fish. He was catching really quite large mahi-mahi, about 30-pounders, give or take. He had flares for any if he was to see some sort of ship or plane or anything like that, he was ready. He was ready with his flare gun, and he could send these flares off that had a parachute attached to them, so that flaming flare would stay suspended for a long period of time, increasing the odds of someone seeing it. He had an SOS signal radio beacon, and the thing was working as long as the batteries were working, at least the beginning of this ordeal. And it would send out this beacon, but you had to be within a 250-mile radius, something like that. It was a big expanse that this thing would transmit, but if there wasn't a boat or an airplane search and rescue looking for this in that particular area, no one was going to hear it. And turns out no one heard that SOS signal. He had a solar distillation apparatus. So basically what you did, it was this it looked like a blimp is basically what it looked like. As you put some salt water on the inside of it, and this clear bag would turn the salt water into vapor, and it would condense on the outside of this bag, and eventually it would collect, it would trickle down and run down, it would collect into the basin that was in the bottom of it, and it actually worked. He was able to get a little over a pint of water a day, he said. Incredibly, he was able to use a few spare pencils and the little bit of notepad and paper that he had. He was able to create a sextant. He was able to calculate the speed that he was drifting and his approximate location of where he currently was, and calculate pretty dang accurately how long at his current speed and trajectory it would take him to get to the Caribbean. However, this was extremely devastating news because his calculations told him that it was going to take about 2 months to get to the Caribbean in the shipping lanes and where any chance of someone seeing him or him seeing somebody else. Brokenhearted as he was about that information, he just kept keeping his log, he kept up his exercises, he was still fishing daily, he was doing his chores, and he was trying to stay active, stay busy, and keep a positive mindset. And then on day 16 came, he saw a ship, a big cargo vessel off in the distance. He saw this ship, and it was an amazing feeling. He saw it and he thought, oh my gosh, finally I am rescued. Can you imagine how good that felt? To be 16 days at sea, lost at sea, adrift at sea, not counting the portion of the trip where he was on his 21-foot boat. 16 days thinking he was going to die, he saw a cargo vessel. The thing passed right by him. He said he could smell the diesel. He saw, heard it. It was right there. They shot the flares in the air. It passed right by. They didn't see him. Can you imagine how devastating, how heartbreaking, what a soul-crushing moment that must have been when he saw that ship just getting further and further and further away off into the distance, and there's nothing he could do about it. He had no choice but to continue on his daily routines, just fishing every single day, maintaining the raft, staying fit as possible, exercising, collecting his water, doing the best that he could. So he was still spearfishing. He was still regularly getting quite large mahi with his spear gun that had broken multiple times, and he had to patch it up and fix it and jerry-rig it a few times. But it was getting the job done. So one day this mahi is right there. He has to wait for a long time and stay really, really still because he can no longer shoot the gun. It had broken. He has to actually spear the fish. So he has to wait really, really patiently and really, really still for a long time so these fish get close enough where he can literally stab them with the end of his spear. So what happens is he stabs this quite large mahi, and the thing's just writhing and moving and stuff. It's not like it's on the end of a line and it can run and wear itself out. He's having to fight this thing. This 30-pound fish is quite strong. They're really powerful fish, and it's jostling and jarring around and twisting and writhing and trying to get free from this spear, understandably so. And it breaks off the spear, and the spear is in the fish, and as the fish is escaping away, swimming away, the spear is sticking out of it like this, and it scrapes the side of his life raft and tears about a 6-inch hole, big gash in the side of his life raft, and all of the air in this tube that's around him just goes into the ocean. So now he's in this deflating life raft, still in the absolute middle of nothingness in the Atlantic Ocean, and his life raft only has a singular inflatable portion now that's keeping him above the water. And now he's like in this water bed now, and it's barely afloat. The waves are easily splashing in, and he's laying in a big water bed, like literally laying in the water now. And this thing is collapsing upon him. It has no rigidity anymore. It's not like an actual shelter structure anymore. It's just keeping him above the water is essentially all it's doing now. So at this point, the man is emotionally devastated. If he wasn't already, now he is a broken man. He's covered in sores. His entire body is covered in saltwater sores. Basically, small little abrasions and cuts in places where he's been laying in the life raft and jostling in the waves, and that rubber's been chafing him. That saltwater's got in there and irritated his skin, and he's got sores all over his body, especially on the regions like his knees and his hips and his elbows and stuff, the part that comes in contact with the raft a lot. And it's extremely painful. He's sunburned and blistered and just chronically dehydrated and emaciated, losing lots of weight. Life is about as bad as it gets right now. Guys, before I finish this story, I want to tell you about a class opportunity, a survival course / land navigation course that myself and Bill Stoker-Matic, as he's known on the YouTubes, are putting together. It's going to be March 29th and 30th here in Blairsville, Georgia. It's going to be fantastic. You're going to love it. Basically, what's going to happen is you're going to learn how to use a map and compass, and you're going to have to land nav your way to and from through the mountainous terrain that we live in to find your survival supplies. You don't need to bring anything, just the clothes on your back, and that's all you need for a good time. If that sounds like something you'd be interested in, go to stokermatic.com. The link will be in the description below this video, and it will also be in the comment section, as long as I don't forget to put it there. But I'll do my best. If that sounds like something you'd be interested in, make sure you sign up for that class. Sign up quickly because it's going to fill up quick. So Steven's now scrambling to figure out how he can tie off this giant big gash in his life raft and reinflate it. He doesn't know how to do this. He doesn't have any tape. He doesn't have any patch kits. He's got nothing like that. So he's going through his supplies, and he's got various types of cordages and ropes and fishing lines and things of that nature. And he's like, what am I supposed to do with this? How can I possibly fix this? Because if I don't fix this, I am done. The next big wave that comes is just going to thrash this thing, turn me upside down, and I no longer possess the strength to save myself and to right this vessel. So he starts creatively thinking. He thinks, okay, well, maybe I'll just take these two flaps that's got this big slit. He's going to take these two flaps, he's going to pinch together, he's going to bunch it together, he's going to wrap a bunch of cordage around it, kind of like tying off a balloon. He's going to wrap all this cordage around it, and that's going to hold and seal it. So he does that, and it works. So he starts to inflate. He's got a little hand pump. He starts to inflate his life raft. But as soon as the pressure builds up enough to kind of give the thing a little bit more buoyancy and structure, it blows that cordage out. It doesn't hold. So he's like, well, crap. I'm done for. This isn't working. I've tried a couple different types of cordages, and this is just not working. I've got to do something else. So he's feeling hopeless. He's sitting in a puddle of water in the midst of this huge, gigantic ocean, surrounded by fish and sharks occasionally coming up and bumping his raft, and he's having to literally poke at the sharks to keep them away. Not that they're trying to bite his raft. It's just that they're coming up trying to get the fish that are taking cover using the protection, the shade of his life raft. And the sharks are coming up, and he doesn't want them anywhere near his raft or potentially biting the raft and damaging it further. So he's literally stabbing him with his spear. Days have gone by of this horrible, horrible misery. And he wakes up out of a nap, and he has this idea. What he does is he takes a piece of a spoon or a fork, He breaks it off and uses the handle to kind of pin these two flaps together. These two flaps together, he pins them together, and then he ties off behind that pin. And that pin keeps the cordage from slipping off, and it works. It actually holds air. Now, it doesn't work perfectly. He's still having to inflate the thing on a regular basis to make sure it stays afloat, but he can pump this thing back up. It gains its rigidity again. He's now back above water, and he's back in business. He can start fishing again. He can start doing his routine and keeping his log, and he's got this boost of morale that he desperately needed at this point. Steven's about 60 days into this ordeal. 60 days into floating on the ocean in the abyss. And he's in a bad spot. He's still doing all the things. He's still trying to maintain whatever morale that he has and trying to stay as fit and as healthy as possible, considering. When he falls asleep, he dreams of cold drinks and juice. He dreams of fruit and all of the things that he's been neglected for so long. And I can completely relate to this. I understand, while I've never done an ordeal as long as this, I've gone 25 days without really eating anything, and that was pretty bad. You start to fantasize about the little things, about salt. Oh, he had plenty of that going around, but I remember fantasizing about a salty cracker, anything salty or sweet or sugary or juice and things like that was just, it's all you could think about. And so that's the state that he was in, but just really bad, in a bad spot. He was having plenty of fish to eat, and he started getting creative. He started craving things that he wouldn't normally eat. He ate the eyeballs of the fish. He was sucking out the juice from the spinal column, the spinal fluid out of the fish. He was eating the internal organs. He was consuming the entire fish. He was kelp, any kind of kelp that would float by, he would take it and he would eat that kelp to just get any nutrients and nourishment that he was missing in his body. So at this point, 2 months into being set adrift, he was a miserable wretch. He was in a bad position right here. He was keeping his logs. He was still charting his course. He was very in tune with the ocean now. He still, despite all of this, found the ocean to be a beautiful place. He was still delighted by the little things, watching the fish and the colors at night around him and seeing these creatures below him in the beautiful night sky. He said he had a view of heaven from a seat in hell. And that's how he described his lot in life at this point in time, 2 months into his floating adventure. So this life raft that he was in had a 40-day guarantee. 40 days guaranteed it would stay afloat out on the ocean, and he has well past that. He's working on doubling that at the moment. His solar still has stopped working. He's had to fix it a couple times, but it has just deteriorated, probably from the solar radiation, from the UV light has just damaged it now, and it's just leaking and not working. Things are going south. His health is declining. He's getting weaker by the day. So somewhere around day 75, he thought to himself, this is it. This is never going to end. I'm going to stay adrift at sea forever, or at least until I die. And then on day 75, at the end of day 75, his boat kind of rubs up against some debris that's floating in the ocean. And it's a bunch of trash. It's like netting and old buoys and just a bunch of junk floating out, this huge big trash heap out in the ocean. And as sad as and as gross as that is, it was a major relief because it gave him some hope that he was possibly near some sort of civilization, some shipping lanes perhaps. He continued to plot his course, and he figured out that he was getting pretty dang close to the Caribbean and nearing some major shipping lanes, which gave him some hope. And that night, on day 75 night, he thought he could see some lights in the distance. He thought he could see just a glimpse of light on the horizon. Not stars, but light on the horizon, meaning possibly boats, possibly land. Very excited about this. This is really a big boost. He thinks maybe there's a chance that I might make it out of this thing. He gets some sleep through the night. Sun comes up, and when he wakes up in the morning, he stands up in his life raft, and he looks off into the distance, and he sees land. He sees land. Can you imagine what that must have felt like to see land after 76 days cast away at sea? Oh my gosh, like that would just be the most overwhelming, all-consuming feeling to see land off in the distance. And what does he see after that? He sees and hears a boat coming his way. So it's a couple of Creole-speaking fishermen out of the Caribbean. They find him, they haul him up out of his nearly deflated life raft into their boat. They drive him to shore. He crawls out, wades his way onto land. He collapses face first into the sand and just thanks God that he made it, that he's alive. The Creole fishermen, they give him a ginger beer to drink, and he said it was just the most incredible tasting thing that he's ever had in his life. They take him to the hospital. He makes a full recovery, and the man is still sailing to this day. What an incredible story of survival. One of the best, one of the most amazing feats of survival that I've ever heard. And I hope that you guys can take something from this story. Most people probably would have given up way, way earlier into this ordeal. He never gave up. He never quit. He changed his mindset and thought, this is not the end of my journey. This is not the end of my sailing trip across the Atlantic. It's just, I'm on a crappy boat now. Thanks for watching, friends. I really do appreciate it. Please hit that thumbs up if you haven't done so already. Subscribe, hit the notifications bell so you don't miss out on any future content. And until next time, what's the worst that could happen? Let's just go on 3.